just went on. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order at 6:30. This is February 13th, Tuesday, a regular meeting of the Governing Board of the Catalina Foothills School District. And on behalf of the Governing Board, I want to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. Members of the public are attending both in person and remotely through YouTube Live. In a few minutes, I'll read the rules of order for public comment at Governing Board meetings. And if you wish to make a comment remotely, you should have signed up using the Google form available under the YouTube Live description. If you don't see the link to the Google form, refresh the YouTube live stream and it should appear. If you're attending in person, the purple form that you need to complete request to address the Governing Board is available on the table in the back of the room. So I'm going to go ahead and call things to order and ask you all to stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the rules of order for public comment at Governing Board meetings. The Governing Board welcomes public comment at its meetings by providing 2 opportunities for the public to address the board. If your topic of interest is not on the agenda, you may address the board during the public comments time slot near the beginning of the meeting. Or if your topic is on the agenda, you can choose to speak just prior to the discussion of that agenda topic. In the event there's a public hearing, the opportunity to speak will be reopened. If you're joining remotely and wish to make public comment, again, you should have already submitted your Google form via the link in YouTube. For those attending in person, please hand in this form to our board secretary, Paula, and you will be placed on the agenda to speak. The information requested on this form is required for our minutes. Speakers will be called on when it is their turn to address the board. For those attending remotely, you may choose to enable your camera. As a reminder to remote attendees who wish to speak, please unmute your microphone when called upon. Each speaker will have 3 minutes to address the board. The sound of a buzzer indicates the end of your minutes. In the event of a large number of speakers, the board may need to limit that time so they can conduct the business on the agenda. By law, the board cannot discuss, consider, or vote on topics that are not on the agenda. This law assures the community that they are aware of topics that will be discussed tonight. If you wish to discuss a topic through written communication, board members' contact information can be found on the district website. We appreciate the community's attendance and comments at this meeting, and thank you for coming. And we are going to now move into item 1.4, which is our outstanding achievements. Dr. Kammerzell.
Thank you. Well over 100 students are going to be named tomorrow in the border, which is a summary of this meeting, and that represents their achievements during the last month. So as is typically the case, our kids are doing great things out there. Congratulations to Brittany Griffith of Esperero Canyon Middle School, who is Arizona's Counselor of the Year. We have 2 Flynn Scholarship finalists, Seth Rojas and Ruby Ray, and they are among the 36 Flynn Scholarship finalists who will be interviewed in March. More than 1,000 Arizona high school seniors applied in the fall for a chance at earning the merit-based 2024 Flynn Scholarship. The 80 Flynn Scholarship semifinalists were previously announced in early January. I'm sure you remember that. And now there are those 36 finalists, among them Seth and Ruby. The 2023 Catalina Foothills High School Falcon Yearbook received a first place award from the Arizona Scholastic Association. It's not the first time that has occurred, but last year's staff had only 12 members creating and publishing then ultimately that yearbook. Today, the Catalina Foothills School District Foundation announced its 2024 Teachers of the Year. They are Kylie Baker, Manzanita kindergarten teacher, and Casey Virgil, Esperero's science teacher. The three distinguished educators are Noah Mickey Coleman. He is Ventana Vista STEM Integration Specialist. Devin Ingley, who is Manzanita's art teacher. And Mary Florick, who is the interdisciplinary studies teacher at both Canyon View and Sunrise Drive. Congratulations to our high school senior, Eliza Cabrera, who has received the prestigious Navy ROTC Scholarship. Recipients receive full tuition, books, educational fees, and other financial benefits, or room and board at many of the country's leading colleges and universities. Our Distributive Education Club, or Clubs of America students, competed at the District 3 conference at Cochise College in Sierra Vista last month, and they competed in events that tested skills in marketing, management, finance, innovation, and entrepreneurship. And 12 students scored highly, and they're going to move on now to state competition. 4 high school choir members performed at the Arizona Tier 1 Solo and Ensemble Festival. All of those 4 singers received the highest possible rating of Superior and have qualified now to move on to the Tier 2 Festival. Our high school theater students took home 14 Superiors and an excellent in acting and music theater performance, a Superior in short film, an excellent in playwriting, and an excellent in scenic design. That was at the Arizona Thespian Regional Festival that was held a couple of weeks ago. Our high school placed first at the Science Olympiad Invitational Tournament held at Castile High School in Queen Creek on January 20th. 3 high school VEX robotics teams participated recently in a VEX Robotics Challenge at Saguaro High School. This year's VEX Robotics event is titled Over Under, which addresses how the traditional methods of teaching science, technology, engineering, and math, in other words, STEM, will not be enough to adequately prepare students for the complex world of the future. It sounds interesting. I'd like to find out more about why.
Perhaps
And finally, the first LEGO League State Championship. We had a strong showing among the dozens of teams who participated across Arizona. The team, the Escape Artists, won the Engineering Excellence Award, which celebrates a team with an efficiently designed robot, an innovative project solution that effectively addresses the season challenge and great core values. The team, called the Bright Light Benders, won the Breakthrough Award, which celebrates a team that made significant progress in their confidence and capability in both the robot game and innovation project, and are a shining example of excellent core values. The team Picture This won 2nd place in robot design for their outstanding programming principles. And finally, the team The Rockin' Robots won 9th place in the robot game, successfully completing most of the season's robot missions.
Wow.
Those are just the few outstanding achievements for January.
The kids have been busy
They have.
across many different disciplines, definitely. Thanks for that excellent report, Mary.
You're welcome.
Well, I feel a little bit unaccomplished. All right, well, from outstanding achievements, we'll go to item 1.5, which will be our Deep Learning Showcase. We have Esperero science teacher Kelly Smith here to talk about the project Growing Seeds from Space, launching scientific inquiry through NASA experiments.
wanted was
get connected with what you were working on in your classroom?
So this has always been a passion of my own, and I know growing up, I didn't have science actually until high school, and I really wasn't the best student myself, admittedly. But once I started, learning biology, all of a sudden, learning became purposeful and meaningful. And then I realized, wait a minute, there's astrophysics and there's chemistry, and it just became alive. And everything, all of a sudden, including math and reading and writing, had purpose. And I want my students to have that purpose and to know that you're not limited in one subject area, that, in teaching science, it's integrated with all subjects. We do math, we read, we interpret what we read, we write about, we use grammar. All these things are interconnected. And it's not just about the subject matter, but it's also about, being curious and passionate about what you're learning, and just having that purpose. The other thing in this video that you'll see is Mr. Joe, our custodian. And that's always been a philosophy of mine is, this isn't just about the students and the teacher, this is about the community partnership. And NASA and GBE, I mean, there's so many wonderful programs out there that, reach kids and reach teachers. And, I was telling others, in a way, COVID was almost a blessing for teachers, because all of a sudden there were all these opportunities for us to participate in. And I didn't have to go to Texas to be part of, a NASA project. I didn't have to pay the money to go there to be part of it. I could be part of it online. And now I've got the materials that they, pay for and send, and I've taken the trainings, and it's just been a lot of fun and a wonderful opportunity for our school.
So this is the connection that you had with NASA that brought this project to your kids.
The connection being just a passion of mine. I think that, you can learn so much through space science. I mean, all realms of science through space. And there's so many projects right now that are part of the future that kids will be part of. And I love that they're inspired by the curiosity. We had the asteroid, we had one of my students, we were just talking about current events one day, and we talked about the asteroid Bennu and how it had landed in Texas. And she went home and told her grandfather about it. And all of a sudden, her grandfather says, well, next door neighbor, it happens to be part of the OSIRIS-REx mission. So naturally, she says, well, Mrs. Smith, can we have him come talk to the class? Well, yeah, that's part of that community component. And he did. He came in, and he was wonderful, and the kids were just so passionate and just enjoyed, seeing somebody in the real world talk about his part in that huge project, OSIRIS-REx. It was amazing. And I think that, that's one of my goals, is to really harness what we have here in Tucson with the University of Arizona and even ASU and all these wonderful, space initiatives, and bring it to the classroom for the kids to inspire them and get them thinking about their future and what they might want to do. And one of the things I think is so incredibly timely is that the OSIRIS-REx mission being such a success, they're opening up a whole new college that is inspired by this project. And by the time it's open, our kids will be starting college. So there you've reached, that little part of what the kids could be later. And that's kind of the goal.
Very cool. Any other questions for Kelly?
A question, I just want to say a huge thank you. I mean, I think in the video, Kelly, you definitely, came across very humble, in that this just magically happened and such stuff. I just want to acknowledge that's not the case. It's teachers like you who make such a positive, massive difference in our kids' lives. So thank you for going above and beyond. Thank you for seeking out those opportunities. Thank you for doing extra training. Thank you for showing up for our kids every single day. We really appreciate you.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I love the school district.
And it's very clear your passion is transferring to the kids. I mean, that was very easy to see from this video. Thank you so much.
you.
Thanks for being here. So fun. Awesome. All right. From there, we're going to go ahead and go on to our public comment session. And let me check on here. I'm seeing no public comments online tonight. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just go with the purple sheets that have come in person in the order that we received them. And our first speaker this evening will be David Hill, who is a former district parent, but still lives in the district, yes?
Yes, I didn't prepare any remarks, and I'll try to be brief, and hopefully there's some content to what I say. My wife and I enrolled our first child in, I can't even remember the school, Sunrise, and then we were all at Manzanita, Orange Grove, the high school, and our children graduated in 2003, 2004, and 2007, and we're just very proud of them. And what brought me here tonight was today one of our kids enrolled both our grandchildren in the district this fall, and I just thought, you know, I'm going to go to that meeting and thank Dr. Camerzell for just the continuity and the just positive experience that wife and I and all three kids derived from the district. And we were involved in athletics, theater, music, the newspaper, and all of those programs were exceptional. I reflect on how balanced everything has been. I have two family members who work in Head Start, and I was on that First Things First Council for a number of years, so I certainly have an understanding of how adverse situations can be, and this has just been an exceptional experience, and I just thought it was appropriate to come and do this publicly. I don't want the attention, I just want to show some respect to Dr. Camerzell and be sure she's aware of how grateful we all are and how many other people feel the same way I do. So thank you.
Here, here. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Okay. Our second speaker this evening is Dan Grossenbach, also a district parent.
Good evening. I'd like to echo some of those comments. My wife and I really love the district, or we wouldn't be here. So we've enjoyed that experience. And I'm going to speak to you today about the counseling program and an email that I sent to you earlier today. And I personally have some experience with the counseling program, mostly positive, some negative, just to be fair. It's been my experience. And I know Mary's been part of that as well. And I just got lucky enough to bump into Mr. Wilton a few minutes ago. So 2015, a tragic thing happened in my son's kindergarten class where his classmate was murdered. And the counselors rushed to to what they do, and they were able to meet with the kids. And I thought that was a good show of support. I think we as a community and you as board members can also take this time to support them, because as you know, on Friday, the rules completely changed with the board credentialing process. So the Board of Behavioral Health Examiners in Phoenix on Friday, across the street from the state capitol, they X'd out this 21-year-old policy that exempted school counselors from board certification and to be under the authority of the board. So if there's a parent or anybody that's wanting to submit a grievance or a complaint, they're able to do that through the board process like any other any other behavioral health specialist. And I noticed on the statute that anyone not practicing or anyone practicing behavioral health without a license is committing a class 6 felony. And anybody who directs them to in administration is also committing that felony. And I don't know what you could plea it down to for a misdemeanor, but that's what the state law is now. It's ARS 3286. My old eyes can't read it. And so since this has been redacted, a few different things in the statute apply to this situation.
Can you wrap it up with your 3 minutes,
I'll
Dan?
just finish it by saying I asked the board just to take time to digest this, but there may be things that need to be suspended so that the staff is protected from any liability. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just gonna double check, make sure we don't have anybody online yet. Nope, I'm still showing nothing, so I believe that is the extent of our public comments for this evening. And we will now go ahead and move on to our item 3, which is our consent agenda. Does anyone have anything on the consent agenda that they wish to pull this evening or comment on this evening? It's a short consent agenda this week.
Yes. Although, as I've stated many times, even though the items that are on the consent agenda we deal with in a ministerial matter, they're still very important to the functioning of the school district, so.
Absolutely.
And also reflect the community, another aspect of the community involvement that Ms. Smith spoke about in terms of, gifts and donations and that sort of thing, which we greatly appreciate.
Well, if we have no commentary or questions or anyone pulling anything, do we have a motion on the consent agenda?
I move that the governing board approve consent agenda items 3.1, the governing board January 23rd, 2024 regular meeting minutes as presented. 3.2, the governing board January 27th, 2024 special meeting minutes as presented. 3.3, the expense voucher memorandum as presented. 3.4, the field trip request memorandum as presented. 3.5, the personnel memorandum as presented. And 3.6, the acceptance with gratitude of the gifts and donations memorandum as presented.
We have a motion for the consent agenda items 1 through 6. Do we have a second? A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. All right, we will move on now to item 4, which is our unfinished business. These are items that we took up 2 weeks ago, and we are now having a second reading on item 4.1, approval of policy JK, student discipline, a second reading and action item tonight. Dr. Bartlett.
Thank you. The 3 policies that I am bringing forward tonight are all changes in statutory language that have come through us through the legislation. So after the first reading of this policy on January 23rd, actually, excuse me, for policy JK, there were really no revisions that we wanted to add. The language that we're adding to all 3 policies from the statute is that a school district is exempt from having to meet the prescribed criteria for suspension of a student in kindergarten through or 1st through 4th graders if there's 2 qualifications. Expulsion is required pursuant to ARS 15841 due to a student possession of a firearm at school, or the suspension does not exceed 2 days, and the aggregate suspension for the pupil does not exceed 10 days within the school year. So prior to this change in the legislation, any length of time, there was a suspension of any length of time for a kindergarten through 4th grade had to meet all of the prescribed criteria prior to any length of suspension. It was a very lengthy criteria. This revision provides flexibility for administrators in discipline matters. However, it is not our practice to suspend kindergartners and 1st through 4th grade students. That's just not what we do. We use alternate discipline strategies with them. However, this is statutory language, so it is included in our policy at this time. And then the other part, there's one portion of a sentence was removed from the 3rd paragraph of the policy, and that was, the language is including situations where a student was not a student of the district. And that was removed on page, I can't remember, let's see what page it was on.
It's the first page of the policy, though, of the actual
Oh,
policy.
yep, I'm sorry.
Yep.
That 3rd paragraph, the very last,
Yeah.
it's on the first page of that policy. So those were the only changes. There were no recommended changes, revisions after that first reading. So this is basically what you saw on the 23rd of January as well.
So just to be clear, Dr. Bartlett, this is a policy that reflects the statutory requirements for, and then we get to the same with the next two that we're gonna look
Correct.
at, suspensions and expulsions, and the statute covers K4. We didn't add it, we're not endorsing
No.
I mean, we are revising our policy to align with the statute, which is actually more forgiving
Correct,
than it previously was.
correct.
And not just, and I imagine we're looking at this now, not because there's an issue in our schools, but because typically this time of year, January, February, we try to catch up on some
Is
policies
when we bring our policies
before we get
forward.
to budget
Correct.
season and that sort of thing.
Correct.
Lest it appear that we are anxiously waiting to
Suspend
No.
some kindergartners.
expel kindergartners or fourth graders. That's certainly not the case. This policy has been, well, it was last revised in '21. I actually don't recall what the revision was at that time, but it could be that the policy existed long before that.
I think in 21 is when they added all of the
They
criteria.
added all this criteria.
Yes, they added the criteria on when you could, or when you may suspend a child in kindergarten or first through fourth grade.
And although these are all basically the same change, we have 3 separate motions tonight for these items. So if there are no further questions on policy JK, is there a motion?
I move the governing board approve the revisions to policy JK, student discipline as presented.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion will carry 4-0. Okay, we will move right along to 4.2, which is approval of policy JKD, student suspension, also a second reading and action item. Back to you, Dr. Burke.
Yes, so again, this is the second reading after our first reading on January 23rd. The same language that we added into policy JK regarding the school district being exempt from having to meet the prescribed criteria is also added into this policy. However, there's some other revisions that we are recommending to this policy in addition to those, which is why we have them on separate agenda items. In the first, so on page 47 and 48, under the area, we added the word short-term to the section about suspensions for less than 10 days, and we added long-term for suspensions on page 48 to the section where suspensions were over 10 days. So it's just a delineation of short-term and long-term suspension. And then the paragraph that describes alternative to long-term suspensions on page 53 of the board book was revised just for readability and clarity. In that paragraph, you can see the alternative to long-term suspension program is to be discipline that requires academic work and may involve outside counseling, participation in a rehabilitation program, community service, groundskeeping, and litter control as determined by the administration. Students will participate by providing support and supervision. And in addition, the lettered statements down below, we removed some of the language that was a little bit punitive, and we made it a little bit softer. So we took out
Instructive.
isolated and put in distanced. We took out confined and restricted. So we've changed some of that language so that it's not so restrictive. And those were the changes. Oh, and we added up in the paragraph under letter E, we added is in abeyance. Was added to describe that the original discipline that would be imposed if the student violates the conditions or requirements of the alternative to long-term suspension.
Again, none of these are different from the changes we discussed. I believe it was the 23rd.
Just that first part.
Just that first part.
Yes, adding the short term and the long term.
Yes, got it.
And then cleaning up the language on the alternatives to long-term suspension paragraph.
Okay. Anything further, folks? Straightforward.
I move the governing board approve the revisions to policy JKD, student suspension as amended.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Second. A motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right, we will move now to 4.3, which is approval of policy JKE, expulsion of students. Again, a second reading and action item, Dr. Bartlett.
Yes. Again, the same language that was added to the prior two policies regarding the district is exempt from having to meet the prescribed criteria is also added into this policy, which was really the main reason we were bringing these policies forward. But after our first reading on the 23rd of January, we did have 3 other recommended changes. On page 59, the language in the second paragraph was just revised to improve readability and clarity. So we just made that more readable. On page 61, under step 3, the word expulsion was added because it was just left off. And then under step 6, number 10, of the expulsion process for regular education students was deleted because it is repetitious, and number 11 was changed to number 10, so that we had 2 of the same there. And then, again, just the language that was in all the other policies was added as well. So just some cleanup of the policy a little bit.
Can't help ourselves, can we? Anything further? You searching for the motion, Doug?
But I now move that the governing board approve the revisions to policy JKE, expulsion of students as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Second. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries 4-0. All right. Thank you for bringing those back to us and making all those changes. We'll now move to item 5, which is our new business. 5.1 will be the consideration of middle school math and accelerated standards for 2024-2025. This is a first reading, and we'll welcome Dr. Mary Jo Connery back to the podium.
Thank you. And I just wanted to say at the outset here that I'm really enjoying working with the teachers, and Cheryl on these math goals, and so we're excited to actually bring this proposal to you tonight. So yes, we are proposing that we add Math 8 Accelerated to the middle school mathematics pathway to provide 3 levels of depth and pacing at that grade level, so to speak. So there would be Math 8, Math 8 Accelerated, and then Algebra 1, knowing full well that there are students in other grades that access these courses. But the Math 8 Accelerated course will allow our students to master and transfer what we've identified as the essential mathematical skills and concepts at their level of understanding by having those 3 options in which to be enrolled in. It will also provide more movement among the pathways at the middle school level as the students themselves discover the pacing that they need to be successful in successive courses, such as Algebra 1, Honors Geometry, Honors Algebra 2, and so on. Before I get into some of the details about Math 8 Accelerated, I would like to extend my thanks to Alyssa Carey, Kathy Spencer, and Katie Sachs for their work on creating this course. Alyssa has been one of the primary people that Cheryl and I have been working with this year as we've started with the high school and worked our way backwards when we have met to work on these math goals. And Alyssa is also the person who works with our secondary folks, grade 6 on up, which starts at Math 6 Accelerated, even at the elementary level. And then Katie Sachs is from Orange Grove, and Kathy Spencer is from Esparrero. And they both teach Math 8 and are familiar with Math 8 and the 7 Excel standards that we were focusing in on in the creation of this course. But before making the decision to add Math Accelerated 8 to the pathway, there were several things that happened before that decision was made. One, Cheryl and I have been meeting with Alyssa Carey since last fall, and Alyssa, and the high school math team identified critical skills and concepts that they've had to cycle back to and review as they've been gaps for students or skills and concepts that have not been mastered previously. And these skills go back to middle school and extend as far as AP Calculus. So Alyssa actually gave examples of skills and or concepts that they're having to go back and cycle through again, even some of our higher end math classes. Additionally, we analyzed the data from ACT Aspire for grade 9 and ACT at grade 11 and the AASA state achievement tests at grades 6 through 8. And one of the reasons we were doing this is we were looking at major categories of learning that were not up to par in terms of proficiency. And so these skill areas were anywhere from 35% to about 52% in terms of non-proficiency. Some of them were partially proficient or getting towards college and career readiness at the high school level, but they were below the range with regard to proficiency. And at the high school level, for ACT Aspire and ACT, they were number and quantity, or number sense, and algebra. And at the middle school level, they were the number system, ratios and proportions, expressions and equations, algebraic thinking and functions. And then also the high school math and science teams came together to look at skill areas that are not only used in mathematics, but the transfer of those skills over into the science classes that require math as well. And those two teams found that some of the skills they're having to teach in science to help those students be successful are fractions and percentages, decimals, graphing, and with labeling graphs, ratios and proportions, solving simple equations, and defining variables. And these are some of the exact same skills and concepts that we found in our analysis of the ACT Aspire, ACT, and the AASA data at grades 6 through 8. Then in addition, we also analyzed a set of data of the students who are enrolled in accelerated and or honors classes over a period of 6 years. And we began by looking at the students who were enrolled in Math 7 Accelerated at 6th grade. And we followed those students all the way through their senior year, which is this year, the 23-24 class. And the reason why we chose that group initially to start with, we looked at all of the students who started in 6th grade. And I know in the board memo, I stated that we were following 84 specific students, but there were really 177 students enrolled in Math 7 Accelerated, but some of those were 7th graders. And we really wanted to look at those students who were beyond the pathway in terms of what would typically happen with kids moving through the pathway if they weren't accelerated, and wanted to see where those students ended up over the course of 6 years. And so we followed them by SACE ID, and so we had every student that started Math 7 Accelerated in the 6th grade, and I shared some sample data. Obviously, there's other data that we've looked at, but in terms of the sample data and the data that we looked at, we found that over 50% of the students leave the pathway before the end of honors geometry. And I gave you 2 samples in the board memo, one being that 84 of the students were enrolled in Math 7, accelerated in 2017-18. The expected course for those students the following year would have been Algebra 1. 56 of those students, or 78% of them, were enrolled in Algebra 1, and 15 or 21% of the students were placed in other math courses. And of those 84 students, 71 were still enrolled in CFSD. We wanted to make sure that we were accounting for the students who were moving in or out of the district when we were looking at that data. And then the following year, those students would have been enrolled in honors geometry had they moved down the path continuously as the expected course. And the data that I shared with you is that 46 of those students, 65.7%, were placed in other courses, but only 24 of them, 34.3%, were enrolled in honors geometry. And then we had a number of students, 22 of the 88, so 22 in the following years, then the 2021 school year, only 22 of those original 84 students, going back to those same students that were enrolled in Math 7 Accelerated in 6th grade, were placed in Honors Algebra 2 and then in Honors Pre-Calculus, respectively. And then by the time that year concluded, only 52 of the 84 students remained in CFSD. But the point is that as these students have been moving through the system, they have not been enrolling in the expected course that follows the course that they were in when they initially started Math 7 Accelerated. The students that were start in Math 7 Accelerated in 6th grade, are those students that are coming out of Math 6 Accelerated at the elementary school, and we're studying the elementary school at this time, and I'm not ready to share that information yet because we're still in the midst of studying that. We're meeting again this week. But the data that we have does show that at our middle level, our students are, in some cases, hitting a wall with some of the skills and concepts that they need to have cemented or have mastered to be successful in the course that follows, and then the successive courses that follow as they continue their years in high school. And so in looking at all of this data, the state testing data, we also had the teachers talk about their unit data, their unit assessment data, their semester data, their classroom data, and what's coming out of instruction in the classroom. We met with both middle schools individually at Orange Grove and at Esperero to talk about the successes and challenges that they're having with the math program, and to specifically look at the accelerated pathway that's part of the math program. And we wanted them to think about it from an instructional perspective, placement perspective, and then movement, on and off the pathway. We had very specific questions that we asked them about any challenges they had even with the movement on and off the pathway, or any pressures they felt to move students along the pathway. And based on all of that and trying to come up with some solutions, we've done a couple of things. We've tightened up our appeal process so that they are in alignment with the high school. The high school classes that are taught at the middle school had a different appeal process in place than what is at the high school. And then we also came up with this idea of developing a course that provides another option for students who, coming out of Math 7 Accelerated, are not ready for Algebra 1 yet, based on a number of skills and concepts that need to be in place to be successful in mathematics thereafter. And we talked about a lot of different options and realized that that doesn't mean that these students aren't going to get to advanced classes at the high school. They will, and there is an opportunity for everybody to get to an advanced class in our high school for mathematics if they choose to and have the desire to do so. But in the board memo on page 2, I outlined the skills and concepts that would be part of this Math 8 Accelerated course. And it's really interesting because prior to looking at some foundational documents that go back to the origination of these standards, our team came up with these skills and concepts that students are having the most difficulty with in terms of mastering them so that they can be successful in the courses that follow. And I recently went back and looked at some foundational documents for the standards that have gone through 3 revisions, by the way, since they first came out in 2010. And it turns out that although the K-8 standards, they have a progression to them, and they look like one standard, comes after the other, and it can sometimes seem that a single standard, is there and only exists for the sake of the next one in the progression. But what some mathematicians and math educators have found, and especially through the work of Bill McCollum at the University of Arizona, who's done a lot with math education and is a mathematician, found that most of the standards that provide the foundation for success in high school math are at middle level. They are at middle school, and most of them are on this list that are on page 2 that our teachers identified. And that if we're really gonna think about college and career readiness is about having those foundational skills at the middle level in place, because those skills, a lot of them that are on here, functions, expressions and equations, some geometry standards, the ones that you saw in the Math Accelerated document, the statistics and probability standards, they nailed them when they identified them, because they are the exact standards in the foundational documents that were mentioned that start to pile up at middle level. And if they don't get these specific skills and concepts cemented or mastered, they will have some difficulty and a lot of difficulty as they progress in successive math courses. So as that course has been designed then, it has been to extend the depth of student understanding of the Math 8 content and extend those ideas to a foundational understanding of algebraic concepts such as rewriting expressions, factoring, solving equations, and rational exponents. And then in addition, in that course, students will spend time analyzing the meaning of an equation, and not only analyzing them algebraically, but also numerically and graphically. So the course is designed specifically for students who need a much faster pace than Math 8, but have not shown mastery of all of the Math 7 accelerated standards that are needed for success in future courses, and need to explore those concepts in more depth. And so it's also not designed to teach all of the Algebra 1 concepts, but is designed to introduce students from an exploratory manner to Algebra 1, as well as cementing Math 8 standards, so that they are very successful in the courses that move beyond that and in future math work. And then the Algebra 1 standards that we have included will build upon the Math 8 accelerated standards in that course. So those students are going into some algebra, but not taking the entire algebra course. And I listed specifically the skills and concepts in the board memo that would be stressed in that Math 8 accelerated course that would focus on the Algebra 1 concepts. And then concluded by showing you some possible pathway ideas that are a little bit different. You know, sometimes our pathway can look pretty linear, and so what this diagram does on the last page of the board memo is to show you how movement of courses can look, you know, on the math pathway and give kids more options. So they can go through Math 6 accelerated, 7 accelerated, 8 accelerated, or move from Math 6, 7, and 8 to any one of those accelerated classes, and or from Math 7 accelerated, go on to Algebra 1 and then honors geometry. The other thing that we found in looking at the information as well is that a number of our students that are coming out of Math 7 accelerated and going into Algebra 1 are not, we have many that are, but we have some that aren't able to successfully master the honors geometry standards. And then in addition, because that's a high school course, we provide them with the geometry assessments instead of the honors geometry assessment, so they're getting credit for geometry instead of honors geometry. That was never the intention for the middle level. At the middle level, it was to go from 7 accelerated to Algebra 1 to honors geometry. But the addition of this Math Accelerated course opens up some other options for students and provides a placement for students that might more meet their level of pacing and provide more in-depth understanding so that they can be successful in Algebra 1 and then move on to honors geometry and other honors or accelerated courses, you know, should they choose to do that. So both of the middle schools are very excited. I even had a teacher write me today saying, you know, are they going to approve this? And I said, well, we've got 2 readings to go, you know, so, but I said, I'll get back to you and keep you updated. So they are excited with the idea of doing this. They looked at the pros and cons. They even talked about, you know, how this adds another prep for a math class, but this is the best thing for students, and so they were excited to be doing it and made the decision that teachers who teach Math 8 and or 7 Excel who are familiar with these standards would be the ones teaching Math 8 Accelerated, because they could write annual plans that include the Math 8 concepts and Algebra 1. So the 2 teachers that helped write this course are 2 of those teachers who have knowledge of all those content areas, and the goal is to start writing the annual plan this summer as a team, and have that in place for the start of the school year, should you approve this course, after the second reading. But they are very excited about having an alternate placement option that honors the students where they are in their learning versus moving them too quickly to the next course that they might not be ready for. And it still introduces them to algebra. And then when they go into algebra, they'll have that comfort level with some of the basic Algebra 1 concepts and the other skills and concepts that are needed for future math courses. And those list of skills that I provided on page 2 of the memo, what we found in the foundational documents for these standards is that those particular skills and concepts are utilized over and over again in future math courses. And it doesn't mean that people are backtracking and they're doing things that aren't on grade level. It's just that those skills and concepts are needed a lot in other math courses. And so it's so important that they have those mastered as much as possible before moving along the pathway. So with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
So can you remind me, Mary Jo, what is the process in terms of, so here now we have this new class, kids are in an accelerated 7, they can either go to accelerated 8 or to Algebra 1. What is that decision-making process? Is it a testing situation? Is it a teacher's placement? How does that all work?
Yeah, there are a number of data points that are looked at. So it's not just one assessment. They look at their semester assessments. They've had a couple of semester assessments. They do look at their unit assessments, and they look at there's a rubric that we use that looks at the students who are precocious, in the content of mathematics, and there's a number of characteristics that we look at that the teacher looks at for each individual student in the math class. And then we also look at their state assessment data as well. Obviously, if you have students who are scoring highly proficient and then they're up on the upper level, and then if there's a mismatch, we want to question that as well. But there are a number of data points, and then at the end of the year, there's a diagnostic end-of-year assessment that is used to see how the students have done on the skills through the course of that year. And then they look at all of that and then make a decision about where the placement for mathematics will be the following year. But in our place, which I think is wonderful, is that we reassess the students again when they come back in the fall, because there are lots of times there are students who have worked hard over the summer and or their mathematics fell into place. It's different for every individual student. I know a lot of school districts, and I've checked around and had previously checked around, that once they make a decision in the spring, that's it, and that's the place those kids are going to be when they come back in the fall. But we reassess them and have opportunities for a reassessment when they come back, and students can still move depending on where they are. I think we asked the teachers and talked to the principals specifically about their work with parents on moving students on and off the pathway, and obviously there isn't really much of a problem with moving students ahead, on the pathway, but sometimes they are difficult conversations when you have to inform a student and a parent that they aren't ready to move on to the next course in the pathway, and but in our conversations, we decided that it was better to add this course and provide another option to help students really learn the skills that are needed for their future success, moving on to the high school in mathematics and whatever courses that they wanted to pursue. So that's the process. There's a assessment at the end of the year, just to summarize. They look at semester assessments that are data points. They have a rubric that they're looking at in terms of how they perform in class with questioning, mathematical thinking, those kinds of things, and they look at all of that. And then they let the kids know and the parents know that there's an appeal process, because if there are students who have a strong will and a desire to move ahead, then they have to meet with the teacher and the principal, most likely at the middle school. That's what they've both Principal Setliff and Rubentoll shared with me, and they'll put a plan in place for the student, and the student may have to work a little bit harder and more to actually meet the plan in order to move to that class. And Alyssa Carey told me that the high school that is as far back as she can remember, and so I said, we'll just use 5 years. in the last 5 years, there hasn't been one appeal, and she said maybe one, where the student hasn't been able to move ahead. Because if they have the will and the desire and they're willing to do the extra work, and they provide lots of materials and things for the students, and Alyssa shared a number of sessions that they offer after school for the students. Not all students can make those because of athletics and band and other things that they're involved in. So they may choose other avenues to work on those skills, but that she says she can't even remember that one's been denied. And we want students to be able to advocate for themselves, you know, and the math if they choose to do that. So that's why we wanted to make sure our appeal process was aligned as well. So that was a long answer to your question.
No, it was a good answer to my question. Thank you. Questions, folks? Oh.
Okay, so it sounds to me like you said you don't see, maybe this might be more of a question for, it's more of a operational question than a curriculum question, which is, do you anticipate needing to add an FTE to offer another course? Do you know that yet?
I have no
No.
idea.
When we talked at both middle schools, unless we have more students that come into the grade levels, that's
Right.
different. But not in terms of this, because what we would be doing is, where there might have been an extra session of Algebra 1, there'd be an extra section of Math 8
Math
Accelerated.
Accelerated.
Yeah.
The other question I had is, first of all, I want to say I really love hearing that you're looking at both the forest and the trees. You know, in other words, the continuum, the work that you did to get the information. Assuming I'm not a data person, so you might have data questions from Gina, but for me, the only question I would have thought of in terms of data is whether you looked at the students who did not continue to the expected level, whether they were having a hard time, if they were not performing in the class that they were in. But you don't have to answer that right now. That would have been my only data
No,
question.
we did.
So-
We looked at all of that. We looked at every single student who was in 6th grade in 2017-18, all the way through to this year's graduating cohort. We even had the students in that, so we listed them as a different cohort 2025. We even had the students listed who, you know, those students who are in elementary school that are going to middle school for math, and then when they're young in middle school, they're going to the high school for math. Those students seem to be doing fairly well. Those are the kids who are like a couple levels ahead or more in mathematics. We even had them in the mix. But we thought, you know, we had to have a place to start, so we said, let's look at up to the graduating class, you know, of this year, and go backwards to the first accelerated class in 6th grade, which covers our secondary. We're also looking at the elementary data, the students who were in extended math, and how many of them, you know, were in 7 Excel. I already know that 12 of them repeated 6 Accelerated. You know, we're looking at all of that data. And so when I do the final with for you in the spring, I'll have a lot more data to share with you. I just didn't want to inundate this board memo with long lists of data.
But really, I think it speaks to, you know, to have a focus on what the ultimate goal is, you know, which, you know, it's, of course, academic success or mathematical success at every level and learning the foundational requirements, but also where are these kids headed? And so it does have to be a whole system-wide review. It sounds like that's what you're doing, which I think is amazing. And then, of course, you said the ultimate goal, which is transfer, and talking to science teachers on top of it just adds like another layer, it sounds like, unless it's confirmation bias, it's like confirming that, you know, yes, these are the skills. So really it sounds like a huge undertaking, but one that will really have a positive effect. My question is, so if you've identified these 7 or 8 topics, whatever it is, the skill sets that are really foundational for success in not just math but science, you know, moving on. So how are we making sure all students are getting that, not just the Math 8 Accelerated students?
In the design of the courses for the secondary mathematics, grades 6 through 12, there's a cumulative review that's built into all of the annual plans and to all the units. And so they've already identified what those skills are, or those concepts are. And so they build that in automatically with some of the tasks and things that they do with the students, which is why when Alyssa met with the high school team, that they were able to identify right away the skills that are those that they need to cumulative review, and those where there were gaps or skills that weren't mastered, coming into courses as they move through the high school. So they automatically do that as a part of the development of the annual plan.
But it sounds like that wasn't so completely successful.
Well,
I mean, if the kids were having trouble
but
and they
that's-
were in math in high school, then doesn't that mean that they need
I don't
to
think
be-
I think what's happening is that these kids we have some students who are working really hard to stay in this accelerated math pathway, but over time, the number of skills that are building up that have not been transferred, have not been mastered, are causing some issues for them as they
Right.
move on. The cumulative review helps them identify who those students are and how much of that review that they need to do. And what Alyssa told us is that they're having to spend a lot more time on that and those missing skills versus the standards that were created for the math class. We're still getting good progress out of those math classes, but they're working really hard to do it.
Was your
The
question-
students are working hard and the teachers are working hard.
Was your question, obviously we know a student who's going to be enrolled in this Math 8 Accelerated is going to have a lot of concentration on these so-called missing skills. How are we making sure kids who aren't in the accelerated pathway getting those same skills? Is there need to pay attention to those classes as well, or those courses as well, to make sure that we're not dropping the ball there as well?
Those standards and the skills associated with those standards already built into those classes. So they would have to show proficiency on those in the unit assessment and semester assessments as they move through those classes. The Math 8 Accelerated is going back to grade, it's mainly focusing on 7 Excel and Math 8, but the beginnings and foundations of those standards start in grade 6. And so they're starting to build up at the middle school level if they're not really transferring them from year to year. So there are already standards that are part of grades 6, 7, and 8 at the middle level, and they're going to have to show proficiency in those and meet a certain standard. When I say standard, a certain grade, certain rubric score, however it's measured on those unit assessments and semesters and the daily classroom work. So those are already built in. The Math 8 Excel is going to focus in on that list of skills and concepts at the middle level that really need to be cemented before they continue to move on to high school coursework and accelerated high school coursework. Okay. But because those, and most of those listed, are the skills and concepts that are hit over and over again, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's interesting, when I was reading this information about in the foundational documents, is that sometimes people think that when you hit those skills again and again in the high school, there's something wrong with that. It's just that those are the skills that are needed to be used in those higher math classes, and actually a lot of them in life. And which is why they were defining those particular middle skills as those that we need to focus on for college and career readiness, and not just the standards that students need to focus on to pass that course. These are skills that are going to get used over and over again. And if they don't have them, they're going to struggle. Let's see what note Cheryl gave me here.
That's why I was asking about everybody else. Right?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I forgot. Yes, that's a good point, Cheryl. Thank you. I think I mentioned in the last report how the middle level meets in the summer and they meet during the school year and they're constantly revising their work. Well, one of the things that they did is they created a whole series of warm-ups for every class. And that's another place where these skills and concepts will be hit, but they'll be quick, and it gives them a real sense of who in the classroom might need some additional help. So there's a number of places where that's happening. And then just to share with you, in case it's going to be a question, Principal Rubentolz and Principal Setliff, we're all going to meet together in about a few weeks to talk about parent communication and to talk about the different ways we want to communicate this. Because obviously the teachers are going to want to start talking to the students about this, and we asked them not to do it until we had until our course was board approved. I said if you wanted to start talking about it among they already, as a math team at each school, already know about this. But I said, if you want to start talking about it, then you need just to say that it's pending board approval. But we're going to put together a communication plan for all of this in the next few weeks after the second reading. And should you approve it at the second reading, put together a communication plan, because we're excited about it. And this is not to be looked at as a remedial course for students who didn't do well on Math 7 Accelerated. This is really about taking the next step to cement some things and also get introduced to exploratory standards in Algebra 1, so that as students move along, they will be more successful in their math courses.
Any other questions, Amy? Okay. So actually, I was going to ask you about parent communication, so thank you for picking up on that one already. Just to briefly double click on that one, I think that I'm sure the messaging will be refined, and I think that's a super important part, is to ensure that both parents and their students and the children understand that this is actually a gap in our curriculum that is now being filled, right? It's a very sort of natural, when you look at it objectively, the question for me is like, why haven't we had this class, right? And I welcome the opportunity that you're bringing now, and that this gap is going to be filled. Moving on from personal experience, I think, I've spoken before that I feel we accelerate our children too quickly through the math curriculum. So I do see this again as a welcome addition. I'm very much looking forward to the meeting where you bring that elementary school information to us. And I think that that's one that, we certainly will want to dive into just as deeply as this one. So my question for you, Mary Jo, is how are you going to tell if this change is successful?
Well, the one way we will be able to tell, well, there's probably several ways, and I can ask, Alyssa more specifically about anything real definitive that she might have to offer with that question. But we have talked about the fact that our students are, right now, they're struggling in I shouldn't say our students, some of our students. For many of our students, this pathway works well. We have some students where it doesn't work well, or as well. And so one of the issues that we found, that the students were hitting a wall with some algebra concepts and honors geometry, and that's why we were having to offer the geometry credit instead of the honors geometry. So we want to see if students then, what is the success rate for these students in class on a regular basis in Algebra 1, and then as they move on to honors geometry. What we found in looking at some of the data is where most of the standards were pooling in terms of the middle level were the Algebra 1 and honors geometry courses. And so we want to look at the success rate of those students coming out of Math 8 Excel and going into Algebra 1, and then honors geometry, should they choose to do that, and see if these students are meeting the standards that they aren't meeting right now. So that's one way. We also, another piece of data that we found is that we have, I wrote it down so that I would be able to say it correctly. We found that our students who are on the accelerated pathway, by the time they get to 11th and 12th grade, that up to about, it was 21% of them aren't even taking math. And so they've met the requirements for math because they started taking accelerated math in middle school, and so they aren't taking math during their last 2 years of high school because they've already met the requirements through Honors Algebra 2, and in some case pre-calculus, honors pre-calculus that we had previous to AP pre-calculus. And they weren't taking any math beyond that when they could be taking AP AV or AP BC or AP statistics or just regular statistics. There's other math courses in there that there are plenty of options for them to take. So here it is. So make sure I'm giving you the right data. It was by their junior year, about 22 students, who started off. This is all of the kids who were in Math 7 Excel. There was 177 of those initially. Not all of them as sixth graders. But there was no math. They were taking no math, 22 of them, 19.8% by their junior year. And then this year, looking at this year's cohort, there's 13 of them, so 22.8%. And this is taking out the kids who are no longer in CFSD. It's not a large number, but it's a number it's a question that you want to ask. Why aren't these kids continuing with math, beyond this? One of the things they tell us in elementary level is that they need to take math all the way through high school, and so they need to be on an accelerated path. We have a number of students who aren't. So we're looking at lots of different data, and it's all helping to inform what we're doing.
So getting back to success
Yeah, so,
criteria,
I mean-
retention, I'm hearing from you, correct me if I'm wrong, retention rates, you're looking at success in the two classes immediately following the 8 accelerated class. You're looking obviously at standardized test results,
Yeah.
et cetera. So a very holistic view of whether this is successful is what I'm hearing from you. Is that correct?
Yes, and I did want to add, and it's not anything that you could put down on paper, but I wanted to share too that anecdotally, what our math teachers are telling us at the high school level as well as the middle school level is that for some of these students, which is another reason why we really have a strong belief in this Math 8 Excel class, is that some of these students are stating that they don't like math anymore. And what I'm hearing from the elementary teachers as we do this work, is they love math, at the elementary level, and they look forward to math. And but what we believe is that we get to this pool of standards at middle level where some of them are hitting a wall because there's too many that haven't transferred now. There's too many standards that haven't transferred, and so they might not like math anymore. It's a lot of work. They're having to do a lot just to keep up with class, and so the teachers are hearing this. We would love to not hear that as much. We want them to to really like math, as they move through school. Obviously, math isn't for everybody, but they feel like a number of students, are saying that they don't like math, and we want them to like math. The other thing that I didn't bring up, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, is we have to also realize that we've experienced COVID through this as well, and that there were a number of things that happened over COVID too. And our teachers acknowledged this at each meeting, that they weren't able to teach. When you've got some that are online, and then we've had some in person, and then some who decided to stay, go somewhere else, and then come back because we went back in person. There's a lot of factors that come into play in this last set of years when we started looking at these kids from their Math 7 accelerated going forward. So I just want to mention that. We talked about it in each of our sessions, but we really also wanted to stick to the data that we had, and where do we go from here?
Other questions for Mary Jo?
Algebra 1's still only at the high school, right? They bus over. Is there
No, we've had Algebra 1 at the middle level.
school?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first time they have to bus is for geometry?
We only bus for those students who are beyond honors geometry. So it was down to just a handful of students at each middle level who are going up there for pre-calculus, honors pre-calculus, and beyond. We used to bus more students a number of years ago, and we added honors geometry and algebra to the middle school to reduce we had too many kids that were being bused.
Dylan could have used it.
Yeah.
Dylan didn't in Spanish, probably don't bus to go to the high school.
Right.
Yeah, so we have those. We experimented with a couple things. This was a number of years ago, and even brought high school teachers down to the middle level. And then we decided to hire secondary mathematics teachers at the middle level to teach those courses because they have to be certified secondary to teach those high school courses.
What's after Algebra 2?
Well, pre-calculus.
And then calc. So if you're on a normal path, what's a normal path? Algebra as a freshman, that considered a normal pathway?
But not all students have to go the A, B, or BC pathway. They could take AP Stats or statistics. So there's other courses there too.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
We'll see it again.
And
For a
thank you
second
to the
reading.
teachers who've been
Yes.
working with you on this
And you,
as well.
Cheryl. Thank you.
All those skills you're talking about are the only ones I use.
Really?
I've been flying plane for 36 years, and I never needed any calculus, but I need to be able to do something on a math in my head. I got to be able to do the basics, and it's all that stuff that
Never fly a
gets,
plane.
that stuff that starts in middle school and then makes the difference. The guy uses a little bit of math, as we like to say.
Well, I was the girl in 8th grade who the teacher told me, "You will never be good at this. I hope you're better at typing."
And she will never be good at teaching.
Never, ever forget it either. Never forget
Out
it.
of there
Like
earlier
that.
than later.
It was hugely
Yes.
impactful.
I would imagine.
Wow.
Well, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mary Jo. Okay, we will see that again at our next meeting for a second reading. And we'll move on to item 6, discussion reports. 6.1 is Arizona legislative / governmental activity. We had the Stiefel
Busy,
report
busy.
in the most recent, one of our more recent communications. That's always a mind-boggling report to read, the Stiefel report. Anything anyone wants to bring up, talk about? Okay. Future agenda considerations. Are you gonna attend tomorrow remotely? Okay, then I'm going to do so as well, and just
Yeah, I
make it
sent you
easier that way.
everything
I saw the link,
this
so,
afternoon,
okay.
9:30.
All right, yes, 9:30. If no one has anything else under future agenda considerations, I would entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move to adjourn.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
Opposed? We adjourn at 4:00. Great. Good meeting. Thanks, everybody.
Great. There we go. Anyone want some